Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is teacher Ryan. Anyway, if you are new here in my channel, don't forget to click and subscribe and hit the notification down to be updated on my next videos. So anyway, welcome to our first episode on the new lesson on the new subject, which is purposive communication. But before we understand about purposive communication, let us first differentiate language and communication. What makes them different and similar? To illustrate, let's imagine a parrot. Two parrots, one that talks and one that speaks. Now, which do you think applies which of them applies language or and communication? Hmm, I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. Now, if you come to think about it, is there such a thing as talking parrot or even a speaking parrot? When do you use talking and when do you use speaking? Alright, so let's find out by this analysis. Language is a system. Communication is a context. When you talk about language as a system, it has rules to follow systematically, arranged through words and sentences, which birth out the need for communication. On the other hand, communication is a context. It has it is a meaningful exchange of information through verbal and nonverbal messages. Let's go back to the parrot. Does parrot, does talking parrot have a system, uses language? Does the parrot use rules to follow systematically? Are there words and sentences used by the parrot? Maybe a little, by just imitating sounds. That is, we call no such thing as animal language. Now let's look at communication as a context. It is a meaningful exchange of information. Parrot can have an exchange of information through sound, but not through words and sentences. Verbal and nonverbal messages. Maybe in verbal, just the sound itself, but no written. But the nonverbal messages, the parrot and even some animals can signal messages through their body language. We can say that there is an animal communication, but no animal language. Maybe in some documentaries, they say it is an animal language, but what they mean is an animal communication. Now, humans are unique. Chomsky said that we have this universal grammar, that we are innately bestowed with language, the ability to have a system using words and sentences that will be part of communication. So, language is a tool for communication. Humans, on the other hand, have this personal communication. Dr. Albert Mehrabian, he stated this 7-38-55 rule. We have this 7% spoken words, 38% voice and tone, and 55 body language. So in other words, that the word that we use has least percentage to be interpreted correctly, but most of the time people misunderstood, perhaps on the tone of the voice that we use, or even if we don't use our words or even our voice, but the way how we act, our behavior will actually determine or convey a message. So 73855. That is why I suggest that you don't need to explain sorry or apology on chat, because the person on the other line may misinterpret your sorry as insincere, unless you will call that person to listen to him or her the way how he or she sounds if the word sorry is sincere. However, does not that does not guarantee if that is the total or the holistic way how we look at sorry to the person who causes hurt or damages you. Hmm. Unless you would like to meet that person in person and talk to each other, and you observe that the way how he or she speaks, to the use of the words and the tone of the voice, and even the manner how he uses or she uses her body will contribute consistently if the word sorry is sincere. So that's why in our communication, we need words, we need voice and tone, and body language. As you can see on the graph, that the body language has the greatest tendency to communicate. That is why people misjudge us based on how they see us through our action more than the way how we sound or even the way how you use the words. This boils down to the question, why is there a need to study communication? We don't focus more on the language as a system, logically and correct way, how to use the grammar and all, but here we'll be looking at communication as as a meaningful exchange of information through verbal and nonverbal messages. Now, why is there a need for us to study communication? Number one, it is a mutual exchange. So it's very hard for us to exchange our ideas to someone whom we cannot talk to or someone that we cannot write to. We need someone. It is a mutual exchange. In order for you to be understood, is you learn how to understand. You learn how to listen. In order for you to speak, is in order for you to learn how to listen. It is a mutual exchange. And we can also have a mutual exchange within ourselves. Just like we have the intrapersonal, it's speaking within yourself. Like how you motivate yourself by tapping your shoulders or memorizing something. There's a mutual exchange of communication. Number two is to be understood. This is what I'm telling you. This is what I have been telling you, that communication, the very objective of communication is understanding. So we have to look at the intention, how we be understood by others. Number three, keep progress and advancement. If you look at our business sectors, the government, the politics, communication is really on the verge of its importance, because this will be part of the success, how people integrate the importance of communication in their workplace, in their job, and some other things. Number four, societal interaction of words. Imagine a world no words at all. We may become animals. We don't use words. So we are string together to use words. Lastly, this is a kind of mystery that only by faith that we can use communication as a connection that we have to God. This is the way how we worship or how we adore to our God. And communication is a gift. Moving on. Now, our first lesson for this is communication, its process, principles, and ethics. By the end of this, you'll be able to describe the nature, components, process, principles, and ethics of communication in various multicultural contexts. This will be our outline for lesson 1: components of communication, the communication process, principles of communication, and ethics of communication. Now, let's begin with the components of communication. The term communication process refers to the exchange of information between two or more people. For communication to succeed, both participants must be able to exchange information and understand each other. If the flow of information is blocked for some reason, or the parties cannot make themselves understood, then communication fails. If you have texted your friend or given an oral presentation in class, then you have engaged in communication. Anytime two or more people get together, exchange messages, they are engaging in this basic process. Although it seems simple, communication is actually quite complex with a number of components. So here we have the 7 components of communication. We have sender, message, channel, noise, context, receiver, and feedback. Though this has been discussed already to you during your senior high school, but this will serve as an overview only. Right? So let's begin with the component number 1, which is the sender. So the sender begins with the originator, who is also called the communicator or the source. The sender has some kind of information, could be a command, request, or idea that he or she wants to share with others. In order for that message to be received, the sender must first encode the message in a form that can be understood and then transmitted. Number 2, we have the message. So the message or the content is the information that the sender wants to relay to the receiver. It is relayed between the parties, put all together, and you have the communication process at its most basic: sender, message, and receiver. Number 3, we have the channel. So when you talk about the channel, or what you call the medium, it is the means by which a message is transmitted, how the message is transmitted. Is it through text messages, chat, call, or even letter? These are transmitted through the medium of cell phones or tools. Number 4, noise. This can be any sort of interference that affects the message being sent, received, or understood. It can be as literal or static over a phone line, or the esoteric or the misinterpretation, a local custom. Number 5, the context. This is the setting and the situation in which communication takes place. Like the noise, context can have an impact on the successful exchange of information. It may have a physical, social, or cultural aspect to it. So when you talk about context, this is where you are. Okay, next we have the receiver. So the receiver is the recipient of the message. The person to whom a message is directed is called the receiver or the interpreter. In order to comprehend the information from the sender, The receiver must first be able to receive the sender's information and decode or interpret it. And lastly, we have the feedback. Take note, there is no such thing as feedbacks because the word feedback should not end in S. Feedback is a collective noun. That's only trivia. So this means that the communication process reaches its final point when the message has been successfully transmitted, received, and understood. So the receiver in turn responds to the sender, indicating comprehension. Feedback may be direct, such as written or verbal response, or it may take the form of an act or deed in process or in response. Now let's go to the communication process. According to cliffnotes.com, the goal of communication is to convey information and understanding of that information from one person or group to another person. So this communication process is divided into three basic components. A sender transmits a message through a channel to the receiver. The sender first develops an idea, which is composed into a message, then transmitted to the other party, who interprets the message and receives the meaning. So the information theorists have added somewhat more complicated language, developing a message known as encoding. Interpreting the message is referred to as decoding. So, for example, Emilia wants to remind her husband Ramir to stop by the grocery after work and buy milk for dinner. She forgot to ask him in the morning, so Emilia texts the reminder to Ramir. He texts back and then shows up at home with a gallon of milk under his arm. But something's amiss. Ramir bought chocolate milk, and Emilia wanted regular milk. In this example, the sender is Emilia, the receiver is Ramir. The medium is a text message, an electronic medium. The code is the English language they are using, and the message itself, remember the milk. In this case, the feedback is both direct and indirect. So Ramir takes a photo of milk at the storage of the store direct and then come home with it indirect. However, Emilia did not see the photo of the milk because the message did not transmit, called to be the noise. And Ramir did not think to ask what kind of milk, the context. Okay? So the important feature in the communication process then is the feedback cycle. When two people interact, communication is rarely one way only. When the person receives a message, she responds it by giving a reply. The feedback cycle is the same as the sender-receiver feedback. If you look at this figure, the sender can't know whether the other parties properly interpreted the message or how they reacted to it. Now let's look at the principles. The following principles that I'll be presenting about the nature of communication. These principles, if assimilated, will facilitate communication and render it effective. Number one principle is what we call communication. It is an interaction situation wherein the participants are affected by each other's behavior. This means every message is simultaneously a stimulus to new behavior and a response to prior behavior of the receiver. No message should be isolated from what has occurred before the communicants or the sender. If we really want to understand the message, it should be understood in the totality of the situation. Number two, one does communicate. We do not communicate even we are ignoring the message We do communicate even when we are ignoring the message of another or maintaining complete silence. Even your silence communicates. An easy way to understand this would be to think what you would do if someone you did not want to interact with passed a smile to you. Even by ignoring him, you will still be communicating. I don't want to relate to you. Silence, posture, and all nonverbal behaviors are the ways we communicate, even when we wish to deny doing so. Number three, the message received is not necessarily the message sent. We usually relate to others as if there was only one reality the way we perceive the world. We all live as separate individuals with different experiences and different views of reality. How we interpret verbal and nonverbal messages may be quite different from the meaning intended by the speaker or the communicator. Even when several people are viewing the same behavior, each interprets it differently. While talking or writing, we are describing only those experiences that occur inside us, and they may not be the same for others because every person, because of his different background, is unique. Number four, communication occurs simultaneously at more than one level. What does this mean? We communicate on the level of the literal content of the information being conveyed, as well as on the relationship level. In other words, we do not convey information to the receiver verbally only, by the context in which the communication occurs, and by various verbal and nonverbal cues, we are also telling the other person how we see relationship with him, how we see ourselves, and how he should interpret our messages. This second level of communication is called meta communication. Meta communication. It refers to any communication about communication or any verbal or non-verbal cues about the literal content of the message sent. For example, you may want to say to another person, I'm very happy with you, and be serious, indicating that I don't mean what I say. I'm also verbally meta communicate by adding, I was only joking, which tells the receiver how he should interpret my original statement. Now, let's have the principles of interpersonal communication. These are the four basic principles of interpersonal communication. So, number one, we have interpersonal communication is inescapable. We cannot not communicate. The very attempt not to communicate communicates something through not only words, but through the tone of voice and through gesture, posture, facial expression. We constantly communicate to those around us. Through these channels, we constantly receive communication from others. Even when you sleep, you communicate. Remember a basic of communication in general? People are not mind readers. Let me repeat. People are not mind readers. Another way to put this is people judge you by your behavior, not your intent. People judge you by your behavior, not your intent. Number two, it is irreversible. Interpersonal communication is irreversible. You cannot really take back something once it has been said. The effect must inevitably remain. A Russian proverb says, once a word goes out of your mouth, you can never, you can never swallow it again. Interesting. Number three, interpersonal communication is complicated. No form of communication is simple. It's complicated. Even relationship sometimes can be complicated. The theories note that whenever we communicate, there are three, at least six people involved. Who you think you are, who you think the other person is, who you think the other person thinks you are, or who the other person thinks he or she is, or who the other person thinks you are, and who the other person thinks you think she is. Hmm, we didn't actually swap ideas. We swap symbols that stand for ideas. This also complicates information. Words, like symbols, do not have inherent meaning. We simply use them in certain ways. No two people use the same words exactly. Okay? Then we have interpersonal is contextual. There are one, two, three, four, five contextual factors. In other words, communication does not happen in isolation. We communicate with others through psychological, which is who you are and what you bring to the interaction. Your needs, desires, your values, your personality, and all form the psychological context. The you here refers to both participants in the interaction. Number two, we have the situational, which deals with the psychosocial where you are communicating. An interaction that takes place in the classroom will be different from one that takes place in a bar. So this is where you are. Number three is environmental, which deals with the physical where you are communicating. So if situational is more on where you are communicating, that takes place in classroom will be a different from the other. But in environmental, it refers to the objects around, like the furniture, the location, the noise level, the temperature, the season, the time of day. All are examples of factors in the environmental context. Then we have relational, which concerns your reactions to the other person. So this is kind of mix. And lastly, it's cultural context, which includes all the learned behaviors and the rules that affect the interaction. If you come from a culture, foreign or within your own country, where it is considered rude to make long direct eye contact, you will out of politeness avoid eye contact. If the other person comes from other culture where long direct contact signals trustworthiness, then we have in a culture context a basis for misunderstanding. Next, we have ethics of communication, straight talk, and nonviolent communication. There are 10 ethics of communication. Knowing, it is the notion that individuals or groups' behavior are governed by their morals, which in return affects communication. So we have number one is seek to elicit the best in communications and interactions with other group member. So it is best for us to really be involved and you're able to listen to their suggestions without being aggressive. Number two, listen when others speak. This is a basic principle. Speak in such a way that you want to listen, and listen in such a way that you want to speak. So allow other people be given an opportunity to share. Number three, speak non-judgmentally. We are actually loaded with a lot of biases, like his or her culture, religion, the accent, and everything about that person. We focus on the intention. We focus on the content. We directly look into the meaning of the communication the person gives to us. Okay, so we need to speak judgmentally. Number four, speak from your own experience and perspective, expressing your own thoughts, needs, and feelings. I want you to look at speak from your own experience and perspectives because the way how you share reflects the kind of personality that you have. That includes your background, what you believe in. So these are the things that will base on your own experience. So you don't invent stories or any irrelevant information that will not be that are not part of your experience. Number 5, seek to understand others rather than to be right or more ethical than thou. Seek to understand others. If you really want to know the mind of the person, listen to the words he uses. But if you really want to know the heart of the person, observe the way his action is, where his action brings him. So we have to seek to understand others, not just by words, not just through the tone of the voice, but where his dedication, commitment to do something in order to achieve success in communication. Number 6, avoid speaking for others. For example, by characterizing what others have said without checking understanding, or by universalizing your opinions, beliefs, values, conclusions, assuming everyone shares with them. For example, if you get hurt by other person or any specific group of people, then you tend to generalize that all of them are just the same. No, we don't generalize or even universalize that life is a cycle. Yes, I know that life is a cycle, but it doesn't happen to all people. We have different narrative arcs. Number 7, manage your own personal boundaries. Share only what you are comfortable sharing. So the gossip happens when we share something out of our own opinion, our own one-sided opinion. So we learn how to manage our own personal boundaries. You just share whatever comfortable that you're sharing with others. Number 8, respect the personal boundaries of others. If the person is willing to share, then he or she can share. We learn to be sensitive to the background of the person. Number 9, avoid interrupting inside conversation. So if you happen to be with a group of people which are talking one another, then you would like to interrupt them, use a polite language that will not affect their conversation. And of course, maintain a two-sided conversation. You just don't need to listen only to one side of the story. Listen also to the other side of the story. Maybe your friend who has been hurt by someone just want to recruit you in order to sympathize of his or her experience. But you also learn how to weigh things out without even trying to compromise one sided story. So be holistic. Lastly, make sure that everyone has time to speak, no? That's all the members have relatively equal airtime if they want it. So you don't monopolize conversation. You solicit information from others because we don't have the monopoly of knowledge. So we give everyone the opportunity to share. All right? So that's it. So in other words, the communication, its process, principles, and ethics. This will serve as our standard, our basis by looking at communication. It is essential for us to know about purposive communication because this is not just about learning something new in the class about communication, because we have heard this many times, but the way how we communicate with others reveals the intentions or the purpose, where exactly we use the words in a particular situation. So, if you have any question regarding on this video, so please feel free to comment down and we will have the next session of this lesson. So I hope you have done something in this first episode of our lesson, which is the process, principles, and ethics of communication. Once again, this is Teacher Ryan. and see you next time in my episode 2 of this lesson. Goodbye and God bless.